I've been getting requests for quite a while now to do a build with trailing arm rear suspension. This is blown up in popularity, and it's something that's very enticing for a lot of reasons, but it's also something that you just need the right project. And I think that I finally have the right situation to build a set of trailing arms. It's something that we can play with over the coming months. It's something we can tune. And today I'm going to go through all the details on when you would use it, when you wouldn't, and if this is something that you should start planning for on your rig. Like anybody who builds an off-road truck, I want to have my cake and eat it too. So today we're going to try and keep the rear airbags. We are going to change our rear suspension to coilovers to make it to where we can have both a coilover and a rear airbag. And I'm hoping that by the end of the video, we can have this sitting under its own weight. We can pull some measurements and calculate to see how close I got on the guess for the spring rate on such a heavy truck. The term trailing arm is a little bit confusing for some people because if you look at a modern four-link rear suspension, the arms are already trailing the rest of the vehicle. So we're not going to redesign the suspension geometry or anything in this vehicle, but we are going to replace the lower link with a link that allows us to move the coil off of the axle and move it right onto the suspension link itself in order to free up some space for packaging and give us something that's kind of fun to tune off-road for a number of reasons. When I'm building something that requires as much welding as those trailing arms, I like to do it in segments and like let things cool down and then finish the next segment and let things cool down. So right now, I'm letting them cool down completely before I start to grind things and fit them into like, there's a lower sleeve that they go in that we're then gonna weld up. But the whole reason for that is that you don't want to like get stuff super hot and expanded and then start to like lock it in with other welds, and then whenever it cools down you have just a whole bunch of really weird stuff going on. So that's why I want to let it cool completely. We're going to grind it down smooth enough to fit in those lower sleeves, and then we can finish weld them and we can chop and modify them. So now what I'm doing just to kill some time is getting everything taken out. I already took the spring off, so we're trying to get rid of this spring altogether. And so I've taken the spring out, I've taken our shock out, and now we're gonna just leave the airbag. This is a factory style Landrover airbag that we're just gonna leave in place because it fits here perfect. And then we're going to pull the lower control arms. We're gonna measure the eye to eye, and then we'll build the new control arms to meet that measurement. And we do have a little bit of flexibility on one side of that joint. So right now, what I'm gonna do is I am going to pull this lower control arm out, so at least we have a measurement to go by, and I'm gonna go over and continue to weld up these trailing arms because that's really the first step of this entire process. Trailing arms are from Barnes 4-wheel drive, and it's basically you can buy just one arm at a time. It comes in a kit that you weld yourself at home, and they sell it in one size. I've noticed that a lot of companies will usually sell one or two sizes, and in this case, it's 36 inches. So we need to shorten it up just a little bit to make 32 inches, and then it'll make it fit our application absolutely perfect. In fact, I'm gonna shorten it down to 31 and then thread out that extra inch just to make sure that I have wiggle room and adjustability for alignment down the road. I have an idea that I think is going to make this lower control arm setup better, but it is going to It's going to change the outcome of this video, unfortunately. Let me show you what I'm thinking about. This is the lower control arm that I just pulled off of the Disco, and as you can see, we have a little spacer on one side. This is a factory, I think it was an M18 bolt, if I remember correctly, and that fits into the 5/8 joint, and I cut this sleeve in order to be able to continue to use the factory bracket that's on the Disco, but be able to use it with an aftermarket joint like this, because this takes up the exact same amount of space as the factory joint did. Now, we are going to be going to what's just a bushing, and my original plan was to weld it up exactly like it's supposed to be. Actually, we do need to weld it at a little bit of an angle. We're just going to tack it, fit it up in place, and then we can tack the other side, and we'll have the perfect angle that we need, because these do come out at a slight angle. Anyway, that was a complete sidebar. What I'm thinking of doing now is this. I just took a measurement. This is the exact same measurement as that. So it would be really smart for me to, instead of using these metal sleeves, to build my own out of some of this 2-inch DOM, because these bushings fit inside it just the same. So I could cut this piece of DOM. We would put these bushings in there. I will drill and tap a fitting for a grease zerk so we can keep pumping grease into that bad boy. And there will be a little bit of a gap inside, but that shouldn't make any difference at all. This should still support from the outside of this spacer that we're going to build just fine. And later on down the road, I might be able to find bushings that are a little bit longer and put those in there. So I don't know. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but I'm thinking this is a good opportunity for us to get rid of extra parts and pieces and make this fit perfect to the Land Rover. And then I had this extra piece of material because we cut these down, and my plan is to once we weld this, to wrap it and then weld all the way around it to just give it like a super tight, super strong captured joint where it connects to the frame. If you're watching this and you're thinking, maybe I should consider trailing arms, before you do, let's talk about the very basics. And believe it or not, it's hard to find a lot of this information online. It's just kind of like in a whole bunch of different sources. So a lot of what I'm going to show you in today's video is very much like a 101, like basic idea of how trailing arms work and their function. And it's based on me being around people who've built trailing arm rigs and me like really studying race cars, race trucks that have trailing arms. So the most common style that you're going to see is what I'm going to call an underslung setup. And this makes it to where the mounting point of the coilover is below the center line of the trailing arm. And this is going to help keep it stable and make it to where it's not going to have a whole bunch of, it's not going to want to like swing and move around a whole lot. Now, I used to see these with like a flexible joint on both sides, but now I see anti-wobbles on the front of all these. And that's basically how this Barnes kit is set up. It does bolt below the center line of the arm, which is great. And it does have an anti-wobble in the front. So this is gonna really help resist it wanting to swing around as you're going up and down over bumps. I have no doubt that this is gonna stay nice and straight and true. The other style would be an overslung style. At least that's what I'm calling it. And as you can see, it would mount on top of the trailing arm, the coilover. And obviously that's gonna put a lot more like side-to-side stress on the trailing arm, so you need like a really strong anti-wobble. You need something like a joint in the front that mostly just goes up and down with like very small amount of side-to-side play, basically no side-to-side play. And this is all gonna need to be like really big, heavy-duty stuff. A lot of times when I see this setup, it's not like a fully fabricated arm like you see with this Barnes kit. It's like a tube with some stuff that you bolt together and then weld on top of the tube. And the tube is usually huge. It's usually not your standard like 2-inch DOM, which is already pretty big. Usually you'll see it 2.5, or I've even seen bigger. So these are the two main styles that I see used when it comes to trailing arm setups. Now, as far as spring rates, if you are 25% in from like the center line of your axle, then you need to amplify the spring rate by 25% because you're creating a whole bunch of extra leverage. So if you're just mounting, like let's say that you're mounting a spring right over the center line of the axle. That is like a perfect, just easy to predict, like 1-to-1 ratio of the amount of force that is coming down on the spring versus like how much force it needs to suspend the vehicle and keep it from bottoming out. If you move that in, you can see like as an arm would be moving up and down, you're gonna be increasing the leverage on the spring. So even though you don't change the weight of the vehicle at all, the vehicle now has a certain amount of leverage on your suspension and you need to compensate for that. If you go in 50%, you're roughly 50% need to increase your spring rate. So you can see the kit that we got from Barnes, I calculated it out and it was 30%, which is pretty standard. And the way that I cut it, we should still be at about 30%. So I had a hard time finding what the spring rates were for the coils that are off of the Disco. I figure they're probably close to 300, and so plus 30% isn't exactly 400, but I ordered a set of 400-pound springs, and now we can run over to the table and we'll talk about the rest of the setup. An obvious pro of running a trailing arm. God, that thing is heavy. An obvious pro is strength. This thing is tall, it is beefy, it is definitely gonna be stronger than its counterpart, which would just be your standard like 2-inch by quarter wall DOM lower. I've bent so many of these. In fact, all 4 of my lower links, which are this exact same material on my TJ, are bent just from 3 really hard years of use of hitting hard off-road trails all over the country. It's super fun, but super taxing. And if you're somebody who needs a really long lower link, like the ones on the TJ are like 40 inches or so, this one's like 32. The longer you go, the more prone they are to bending. And so this is not a bad option. It's a fabricated link. It's super strong. So in the pro department, strength is definitely up there. Another pro is packaging. And this is the reason that we're doing this on the Disco. We can put our airbag in the back, just like the normal factory spot, and we can move a coil up here as a fail-safe. I want to have all the benefits of an air system without the one huge con. If the air system fails or you blow out a bag, you're dead in the water unless you fix it or replace the bag or whatever the situation may be. Because I'm running dual suspension systems, this is going to be our fail-safe. So I want this to be able to run down the road just fine with 0 air input, but I still want the benefits of the air. I love having an air system. Again, I just want to have that fail-safe whenever we go on really long trips. So this is going to give us the ability to do that. Another pro, we can run an 8-inch stroke coilover. This is a really short coilover and still get plenty of wheel travel because the trailing arm allows us to basically compound that travel by the time it gets out to the tire, freeing up just more. It's just packaging. It's all about the packaging. So cons. Because it takes so much more wheel movement to make the shock influence the ride, let me make sure, I'm just trying to explain this the best way I can. It makes it to where we're gonna have to revalve the shock. There's no doubt about it. We're gonna have to neck down the flow in this shock as much as possible to make it to where on the highway, the Land Rover is just not like super floaty. It's already top heavy, right? So we're gonna have to neck that down. Why is that a con? Well, not only do we have to open this up and change it and buy extra stuff, but it's also gonna make it to where in the wrong build, you can build a ton of extra heat because you're making it harder for the oil in the shock to flow through, and that is going to build extra heat. So if you're watching this and you're wanting to put together a desert setup, I would highly recommend running dual shocks. Complete sidebar here, guys. But dual shocks are gonna make it to where you can split that valving. You don't have to go near as hardcore with the valving, which is gonna make it to where it's not gonna run as hot, and you're gonna be able to split the heat that it takes to dampen the ride amongst more shocks, which is gonna make everything run way cooler. So we're gonna be able to get away with this because the closest thing to desert running we're gonna be doing is just bombing down dirt roads on the way to camp. Rock crawling isn't hard in this kind of setup, you know what I'm saying? So you just gotta think about those kinds of things whenever you're picking out what suspension style you wanna do. Another huge con to this is clearance. So if you do wanna do rock crawling, I wouldn't recommend this system. I mean, I know that it's really cool to do trailing arms. It makes you feel like you're driving an Ultra 4 car. They're rad, and they're super neat. They're really pretty. I mean, come on, this thing looks amazing. But most of us don't need them. You know, another big con is weight. Are you trying to keep the weight down? This is not the route. You know, you can get away with doing one of these, and if you bend these like crazy, you could level up to an aluminum lower link. Those are actually made to bend and contort and come right back to straight. So there's other options out there, but in our case, I really believe that if you're me and you want to have your cake and eat it too, this is like the only way that I can do that and get everything that I want. This video just turned into 2 parts, and it's kind of dumb, but let me show you why. Because we widened this out, I'm having a hard time finding like the sleeve material for the inside of our bushing, which, God, that feels like such a dumb reason to not be able to continue, but it's really important, and I want to paint this. We still have some work to do up here. We got to clean this up, and we're going to modify this guy. And when you couple all that together with the fact that we want to revalve our coilovers in the same episode, which means we're going to have to go take it wheeling, I think that we just have too much to do in one episode. So if you know a place online that I can buy some 5/8 inner diameter, 3/4 outer diameter sleeves, even if I can buy like just stock, like, you know, a foot of it, if you know a place online I can get it, please let me know in the comments. I want to order this ASAP so that we can continue on this project. I'm super pumped to get this on the trail, and that's what I want to do in the next episode, is we're going to get all this together, we're going to drive it, we're probably going to revalve it, and then I mean, it should be a pretty fun episode just to see how all this turns out. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.